I think it's about time we talk about the brand new interview that went up in Famitsu magazine this week with the director of Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Pokemon Let's Go Eevee, Junichi Masuda. And it's a very interesting interview that divulges a lot of details. So first I'm going to go through all of the full translation that was provided generously by NintendoEverything.com. We'll have a link down to that translation below. And we're just going to read through the entire interview because there is so much stuff in here that I think we need the full picture before we can really talk about anything else. So here is the full translated interview. Famitsu says, so you've already discussed this in a variety of pieces, but could you tell us about how you developed the concept of the two games? Masuda says, with the success of Pokemon Go, the Pokemon franchise's impact on people has increased greatly on a global scale. However, despite the fact that Pokemon Go events bring in a lot of trainers, not all of the people experience the rest of the Pokemon series. On the other hand, players who have enjoyed the mainland Pokemon games up until now may not necessarily be playing Pokemon Go. So naturally, the driving force behind development of Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee was bringing those two groups of people together in some way. Our approach could be best summarized by saying that our goal was to make a Pokemon game for everyone. Famitsu then says, Pokemon Go can't be played without some kind of smart device, right? Masuda responds, that's right. For example, there are a lot of kids that don't have smartphones yet who can't experience Pokemon Go. We basically made this game to allow people who might not have access to Pokemon Go to enjoy a Pokemon Go-esque experience. Of course, this also presents an opportunity for parents to enjoy the franchise with their kids. Famitsu then says, this kind of game does certainly seem like it'd be optimal for parents and their children to play together. Masuda responds, right. For example, let's say a parent and child go out to play Pokemon Go together. After they come home, they can bring the Pokemon they caught in Pokemon Go over to the two Let's Go games and continue playing together on the living room TV. That's the kind of natural blend between Pokemon and the flow of everyday life that we considered over the course of the game's development. It isn't just about the experience of throwing a Pokeball, but being able to play and experience Pokemon as part of everyday life. I really wanted both fans of the mainline series and fans of Pokemon Go to be able to get a taste of that. Again, to put it frankly, we wanted to make a Pokemon game that all fans could enjoy. Famitsu then says, so in attempting to implement that kind of gameplay, what kind of challenges did you face? Masuda responds, well, we had to update the graphics without making them too realistic. We wanted to maintain the game's fantastical elements so as not to surprise any parents who may be watching. For instance, we pictured a child playing the game in the living room while their mother watches from the kitchen. It needed some kind of game that would give her a peace of mind. We based the sound design off of a similar philosophy. We were particularly conscious of the need to express a sense of gentleness and ease throughout the game's world, so we primarily utilized classical instruments. Personally, though, I'm quite the fan of the fast-paced techno music. Haha! Which reminds me, I'm actually not in charge of the music. That would be Mr. Shota Kayama to be exact. Rather than having a specific direction that he composes the music in accordance to, he primarily focused on what he feels would be comfortable for players to listen to while playing the game. As for the actual hardware aspect of the game's sound design, the number of things we're capable of musically have increased dramatically. We're capable of more technically. So much that we think players will be able to feel the music on a more profound level than before. So please look forward to it. Then Famitsu says, a life where Pokemon always has a presence. Even just thinking about it is exciting. Masuda responds, we created the two-player mechanic that with that blend of Pokemon and everyday life in mind as well. It isn't limited to parents and their children, of course. Siblings, friends, significant others, a whole host of people will be able to play together. Then Famitsu says this, beginning with the actual capturing mechanics, you seem to be utilizing many of Pokemon Go's mechanics in a variety of places. What do you aim to accomplish through this? Masuda responds, we're incorporating the best mechanics from both the core games and Pokemon Go so that both groups of players can enjoy a fresh experience. Although it seems like games are based around Pokemon Yellow version, there are elements of Pokemon Go as well. We tried to find a happy medium between the interesting features of both games and ended up pursuing what you see now. Famitsu says, incorporating elements of Pokemon Go is quite groundbreaking. It must have taken a lot of courage to make that kind of decision. Masuda responds, It was a daunting task we took upon ourselves, for sure. There was considerable debate with the team concerning the absence of wild Pokemon battles. Up until this point, I had been steadfast in defending the mechanic as the series director. This time, though, I feel like we should try to change things up a bit. Personally, I've always felt that the weakening and capturing mechanic is a bit like fishing. There are people that aren't fans of that kind of strategy, though. To that end, as I mentioned before, I wanted to make these games more enjoyable for a wider audience of fans. As such, we simplified the mechanics. Until now, catching Pokemon has been vaguely reminiscent of fishing, whereas I'd liken the new mechanic to catching bugs with a net. I had to wonder if people will enjoy that sort of straightforward mechanic more so than the previous mechanic. Then Famitsu says, changing something so fundamental as the capturing mechanic would be difficult for somebody who isn't you, Mr. Masuda, wouldn't it? None of the younger staff could decide something as bold as that, I'd imagine. Masuda responds, there are certainly plenty of other mechanics that'd be difficult to change, I guess. But if we as developers don't actively confront those kinds of challenges, the series gameplay would become fixed and stale, wouldn't it? So, to prevent that staleness, I like to keep proposing new ways to play without any reservations. Of course, there will be those that aren't satisfied with the changes, but even so, the driving idea behind the games is that they're for everybody to enjoy. Given that philosophy, I will do my best to make sure that future games will reflect the feedback we receive, both good and bad. Then Famitsu says, obviously the gameplay is significantly new, but as a whole, can you tell us how the story has changed? Masuda responds, in making a 20-year-old product, the hardware is completely different, and the graphics and sound have evolved to a completely different caliber. The story, however, hasn't really changed all that much. Players will notice a few additional elements here and there. For example, now I think back on Pokemon Yellow version, there are some instances where it might be difficult to figure out where to go next, or what the next objective is. In this game, by contrast, there are a few supplementary features that make the game a bit easier to play. Then, Famitsu says, it seems it might be easier for even first-timers to progress through the game. How about battles and training Pokemon? Are they much different? Masuda responds, when it comes to training Pokemon, you can still level up by catching Pokemon and through trainer battles. Additionally, you can send caught Pokemon to the professor to receive candies that you can use to directly enhance your Pokemon's strength. I thought about implementing training in a variety of ways, but when it came down to it, utilizing Pokemon Go's system seemed to be the simplest and most comprehensible. Regarding battles, we changed the UI a bit, but the logistics of the battles themselves are largely the same. I really want those who have stuck with the Pokemon franchise since its early days to be able to recall their experience playing Pokemon Yellow version. Then, Famitsu says, the way you simplified certain areas of the game makes it seem like the game will be fun for all types of players. Was having wild Pokemon appear on the map itself also a product of seeking a higher level of user-friendliness? Masuda responds, I didn't really consider it at first. But the more I thought about catching Pokemon as catching bugs in a net, I decided to implement a system in which you could decide to catch a certain Pokemon after seeing it from a distance. In order to cultivate that sense of realism, I decided to have them viewable on the map. Famitsu says, I see. Having every single Pokemon has a movie animation would be an immense workload, wouldn't it? And Masuda responds, that was definitely the case. The programmers who were in charge of that did a great job, though, so I think it was the right decision. Walking, stopping, and even just looking idly around, each Pokemon has animation characteristics to themselves. Famitsu says, that'll definitely strengthen the bond between you and your partners, too. This seems like the kind of game that you could easily get lost in by just watching each Pokemon's behavior. Masuda responds, the Pokemon you see in the field are incredibly lively too. Just watching the Pokemon is great in of itself, but I feel like it's also nice to finally be able to see Pokemon. Think to yourself, I'm going to catch that, and then just do it. Famitsu responds, speaking of map encounters, in the footage that was shown off during the Nintendo Treehouse Live presentation at E3 2018, you could see Pokemon on the map that had both red and blue auras around them. What exactly do those auras mean? Masuda responds, those auras mainly present the size of the Pokemon effectively. The red aura represents a Pokemon on the bigger side, where the blue aura represents a Pokemon on the smaller side. There is a similar mechanic in Pokemon Go. Some people like bigger Pokemon, while other people like smaller Pokemon. These auras allow trainers to catch whatever size Pokemon they like. Famitsu says, when Pokemon Go was first released, some were discussing how size might affect the strength of the Pokemon itself. What do you have to say about that? Masuda responds, that isn't the case. Size is one of the elements that Pokemon Go that I definitely wanted to include in these games. For example, it's handy to be able to remember things like, oh, the Pokemon I caught in that particular area was big. If by chance all the Psyduck you catch in a particular area are big, you could imagine something like, that place must be abundant in nutrients, or something like that. In that way, if there's one Pokemon that really just sticks with you, There are even multiple varieties for you to catch. Famitsu then says, nowadays it seems like the perceived Pokemon is more than just game characters, don't you think? Masuda responds, in the past I avoided putting things like clothing on Pikachu, mostly because people might have been confused as to what were clothes and what was its body. Machamp, by the way, isn't wearing pants. That's his body. These days, if a Pikachu is wearing clothes, people can still perfectly recognize that it's Pikachu, and I really appreciate that. Famitsu goes on to say, in Pokemon Yellow version, your partner Pokemon, Pikachu, could walk alongside you. In the newest iteration of the Pokemon games, you could choose either Pikachu or Eevee depending on which version you buy. Can you tell us a little bit about why Eevee was chosen to be one of the player's potential partners? What prompted this change? Masuda responds, well, in Pokemon Yellow version, Eevee is the first Pokemon your rival chooses, but truth be told, in the end, it was the depth of the fans' love for Eevee that prompted the choice. A lot of fans send me pictures of Eevee that they themselves have drawn. Sometimes they're even cuter than the official art. The fan support was particularly evident on November 21st, which we've declared to be Eevee Day, a day celebrating the Pokemon and its evolutions. The celebration was really reached a lot of fans. When you see one, you can't help but be excited and wonder what it's going to grow into. It radiates the same kind of cuteness as a baby, I think. In the end, the cute charm that Eevee exudes is what cemented the decision. I definitely didn't want fans to be disappointed by the choice, so I did a little bit of research beforehand. Oh, what kind of research? Masuda responds. First, I talked with those in the office that really liked Eevee and found out what about it fascinated them. I learned quite a lot, actually. For instance, when I asked them what contributed to that infant-like cuteness, a lot of the people mentioned how fluffy its neck and tail were. At any rate, I desperately tried to make it as cute as I possibly could. It's thanks to the fans that Eevee is where it is now. Famitsu says, Eevee truly is well loved. By the way, since Pikachu is voiced by Ikyu Otani-san, in the most recent games, as it is in the anime, does Eevee have its own voice actor? Masuda responds, Oi, Yuka-san is the voice of Eevee. Thankfully, Yuka-san really loves Pokemon and brings an amazing energy to the role. She had previously shown up to an event coordinated around Eevee, and we were left with the impression that she really liked it. In truth, we actually decided on Eevee's voice through an extensive audition. 108 people showed up to try out for the role. At first, we just judged simply based on the voice without knowing the actual names of the voice actors, and so it was that Yuki-san was the only candidate that made it until the end. Famitsu says, as one would expect, she really does love Eevee, doesn't she? Masuda responds, and that love translates into motivation. That's crucial. Recording couldn't have been easier. Players are going to hear Yuki-san as Eevee no matter what they are in the world. I'm truly thankful to how motivated she was in the role. Pikachu's name is the same no matter where you go, but Eevee's is a bit different. For instance, in America, it's Eevee, of course, but yet in Germany, it's Evoli. Yuki-san has to record all of those different cries for each language and works tirelessly alongside Mr. Mima Masafumi, the sound director for the Pokemon anime. Famitsu says, of course, even in the game's preview, it doesn't simply cry something like Eevee. Masuda says, that's right. Your partner Pokemon are special in a variety of ways, however, not just because of their cries. For instance, just like your Pikachu from Pokemon Yellow version, the player's partner Pokemon will not evolve. Moreover, while there are differences in the tail shape of male and female Pikachu, there are also differences between male and female Eevee as well, as females' tails have a heart designed on the tip. And then Famitsu says, the differences between males and females must come as great news to the fans. Masuda says, we've also added a mode in which you can interact with your partner, Pikachu or Eevee. So a lot of voice clips had to be compiled for that as well. Even in Pokemon Yellow version, your partner Pikachu would have a variety of responses should the player interact with it. Now, should you interact with your partner, the game is chock full of responses for you to discover. Famitsu goes on to say, it really does seem like Pikachu and Eevee will be right there with you all the while. Masuda responds, I was really particular about the details of the interacting mechanic. Both Pikachu and Eevee had their own motion designer solely dedicated to them. Originally, there was one person in charge of both of them, but they suggested that the arrangement would end up having them divide their affection between the two. I figured that it might be the case, so I brought in another motion designer and requested the two give their all to their respective Pokemon. Both Pikachu and Eevee ended up having a lot of gestures, movements, and characteristics to themselves. I doubt that one could just sit there and watch them and get bored. Then Famitsu says, please tell us how you implemented Pokemon Go, its mechanics in the Let's Go games. What did you come up with the idea in the first place? Masuda says, it was something that I have been thinking about for quite some time. When was that now? Famitsu says, in fact, in an interview with our magazine a few years ago, you mentioned something pretty close to it. Something you've been working on since then? Masuda responds, really now? In any case, I have been thinking about some kind of mechanic in which you'd connect your Nintendo 3DS and your smartphone. but that ended up proving to be a bit too complicated. At the time, I thought there were a lot of people looking to have more fun while exercising, so I figured I could manage to come up with something simple that revolved around that. There wasn't much we couldn't do. In fact, there was lots of methods and players could set their preferences through initially, such as connecting through the internet, through a computer, and the like. Famitsu says, that doesn't seem too practical though. Masuda says, right. I didn't even want to go through with it. It was the Nintendo Switch that ended up solving a lot of the issues we were having. By utilizing Bluetooth Low Energy, we were able to come up with a simpler alternative for connecting the devices. Famitsu says, in concrete terms, exactly how simple is connecting the devices? Masuda responds, a great deal of Pokemon Go players are already able to connect their smartphones to their Pokemon Go Plus device. Connecting through BLE acts in a similar way. Imagine it's the same kind of sensation as connecting to a Pokemon Go Plus. Famitsu says that does seem pretty handy. Regardless, I don't know you went through so much difficulty in order to implement such a feature. Masuda says, it was pretty difficult to understand. After a good deal of talks between Nintendo and Niantic, we were finally able to come up with a concrete idea. Nevertheless, even though we figured out how to connect smartphones with the Nintendo Switch, there are a variety of types of phones from a whole host of manufacturers, and as such, we're doing our best to make the technology work with as many types of phones as we can. Famitsu then says, we're really looking forward to seeing how it all pans out. Incidentally, I think that there are a lot of people who've gotten attached to the Pokemon that they've caught in Pokemon Go. These games have an appeal for that kind of player. Masuda says, I think one of the best things about Pokemon Go is that it's the kind of game that really allows you to remember when and where you caught your Pokemon. Naturally, you'd want to keep those Pokemon and the memories they carry close at hand, right? You can take those Pokemon and the countless other Pokemon you've captured to the Let's Go games and add them to your team to interact with them or even enjoy their in-game animations in the game's Go Park. Famitsu says, I'm sure the more Pokemon you transfer, the more familiar the mechanic will become. Can you tell us anything about the Go Park mechanic? Masuda responds, the Go Park is a method by which you bring your Pokemon from Pokemon Go to the Let's Go games. Pokemon that you have on hand can be brought over. Famitsu says, speaking of, will Pokemon maintain their CP value after being brought over into the Let's Go games? Masuda says it has to be recalculated to fit with the game. So no, a Pokemon's CP will not necessarily remain the same. Pokemon with a high CP value in Pokemon Go will have a relatively high level after being brought over to the Let's Go games. Famitsu says, how do Pokemon's level and CP differ? Masuda responds, well, for one, Pokemon of the same level may have entirely different CP. This generally means that the Pokemon with a higher CP must be better in some way. If anything, the CP value is only there so that fans who have played past entries in the mainline series can better understand the strength of their Pokemon. Famitsu responds, so in other words, a player who wants a high-performing Pokemon have to keep an eye on its CP value as well. That reminds me, around May 30th Pokemon press conference, there were some rumors that players may be able to befriend Alolan from Pokemon as well. Alolan form, right? Yeah, Alolan form Pokemon as well. Is there any way to catch these Pokemon aside from bringing them from Pokemon Go? Masuda responds, Alolan Pokemon will not appear in the wild in-game. As such, they can't be caught in-game. However, it is possible to acquire them through means outside of Pokemon Go. I can't say exactly how to get them yet, but I will say that you get them through something that's a pretty well-established part of the mainline Pokemon series. Probably. Famitsu says, I see. I suppose that means that you could somehow get them even if you don't play Pokemon Go. By the way, what about the Pokedex? I think that players who have already caught all 151 Pokemon in Pokemon Go would be able to transfer all of their Pokemon through the Go Park to complete their in-game Pokedex, for instance. What do you think about that? Masuda says, actually, it will only be possible to bring Pokemon over from Pokemon Go after reaching Fuchsia City. Until then, you have to use Pokemon that you catch in-game. So even players who have only played Pokemon Go will be able to enjoy the game. Again, it'll all be a great deal of fun to play through, so do your best to catch them all. Then, Famitsu says, we can only wonder what's in store for us. We'll pay close attention to the game's actual contents. Masuda says, again, I can't really say much, but if you catch all of the Pokemon within the Kanto region, something good is bound to happen. Then Famitsu says, let's talk a little bit about Pokemon Go itself. First, it has been out for 2 years since the game was first released, and has significant changes since then. Mr. Masada, how do you view the progress? Masada says, the sheer massiveness of the public's response really shocked me. I feel a lot of people have even discovered the Pokemon series through Pokemon Go. I'd imagine a lot of people became particularly acquainted with the Pokemon native to the Kanto region. As they were released, people eventually became familiar with Pokemon from the Johto and Hoenn regions too. Even now, a lot of people still play the game. Famitsu says the friend list and trading were added to the game the other day as well. Masuda says, we have been thinking about those mechanics for a long time, but we're finally able to implement them. I think that'll be a lot easier for people to connect with each other now that those mechanics are in place. I feel like it was a good approach to release those features around the 2-year anniversary. Then Famitsu says, the Pokemon Go Summer Tour is also happening this year, isn't it? It's coming to cities like Dortmund and Chicago. There's a lot to be excited about. Masada says, at last year's event in Chicago, the communication network is unstable and caused quite a bit of trouble for everybody. Even still, the event was incredibly exciting. The city was absolutely filled to the brim with trainers playing Pokemon Go. You could really see how games can bring even strangers together. Famitsu says, Chicago brought a really unique feeling to the event. Do you think this year's event at Yokosuka will meet Japan's players' expectations? Masuda says, by all means, look forward to it. Everybody please take the train, and if you can, it'd be pretty bad if everybody came by car. Famitsu then says, all right, let's switch gears now. About the 2019 Pokemon game. Can you tell us anything about it in its current stage? Masuda says, as I've already mentioned, the Let's Go's games were pretty challenging to develop. The 2019 title will truly be a game for those that are already fans of the core Pokemon series. Expanding the series onto the Nintendo Switch has definitely presented new challenges. Famitsu then says, the Pokemon Company's president, Tezunkazu Ishihara, announced that the 2019 title will have more hands-on playstyle. Can you tell us anything about that? Masuda says, for the Let's Go players, we imagine that be the kind of game that you'd play at home on your TV. The 2019 title, on the other hand, is the kind of game that would play with friends on their Nintendo Switch systems. Those who are familiar with the series through the handheld titles will feel right at home. It'll be more closely aligned to a traditional Pokemon game. Then Famitsu says, will you be able to bring Pokemon over from the Let's Go games to the 2019 title? Masuda says, there have been times where you couldn't bring Pokemon over from previous titles, and I imagine that created some bad memories. I want to try and change that if I can. Then Famitsu says, great! Now, do you have anything to say to the fans who are eagerly awaiting for the release of the Let's Go games? Masuda responds, the Let's Go games are a true reworking of the Pokemon formula. You can see Pokemon moving about on the map and can even walk with a partner Pokemon of your choosing. We really wanted to rework the game to capture the experience of being with your Pokemon. It truly captures a feeling we haven't been able to before, and I hope everybody enjoys that. We'd also love to see people play this Pokemon game differently from the past entries in the series. Again, you can play the game without having played Pokemon Go, but we found that Pokemon Go really increases the scope of the experience. Please enjoy the game as much as you can with your family and friends. If you're going to say to yourself, I don't have anybody to play games with, don't worry, the games are still fun to play alone, so please enjoy. To give full credit here, Nintendo Everything did note that Nico Thaxton is the person who did the translation of this interview. Now, again, that was a lot of information to take in. It took me like 22 minutes to get through everything. I think the general takeaways I have from this, I'm going to keep it brief because this is already a long video, is that the Pokemon Let's Go games are exactly what they pretty much said all along. It's like a gap bridging like game. It's a game that brings people who have never played traditional Pokemon games together. It brings together people who play Pokemon Go. It brings together core series, mainline Pokemon fans, and puts them all together in one game and does something different. And then these differences could translate to the future, or they might not translate at all. But it's interesting because a couple things we learn in here is that, one, he does feel that the capturing mechanics are easier or more simplified in Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. I'm not sure if I agree with that statement based on my experiences, but this is the intent. The intent is to make it easier, make it more approachable, and I mean, whatever. It's different. I know a lot of people either love it or hate it, so at this point, nothing I say is going to change your mind. You either really, really love the change or you really, really hate it. I do think it's interesting to note that it says, oh, you can get a low-end Pokemon without having to transfer them for Pokemon Go, but you can't capture them in-game. I think that's kind of sort of a reference to the fact that Pokemon Bank will be usable with Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee, because then you could transfer them over from Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, and Sun and Moon. And it's also interesting how he said, there's been times that you can't transfer Pokemon from prior generations over. He doesn't want that to be the case. So it sounds like next year's Pokemon game, you'll be able to transfer in your Pokemon from Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, chances are, through the Pokemon Bank. So very interesting stuff here. It's it's cool to kind of see how Pokemon Let's Go Eevee, Let's Go Pikachu kind of evolved and became this thing. Obviously, a lot of people are going to walk away from this interview saying, see, all this is Pokemon Go on your home console. But it's not just that, because, as I said, the intent of this game is to be played at home on a TV. So it's a very different approach to a Pokemon game in that sense, in that they expect you to be sitting on a couch. They don't expect you to be picking up your system and taking it with you. Now, you can do that, of course, and they've implemented ways to still play the game, but it's obviously not intended for that kind of experience, and next year's games will be, which I think is also almost in a way a little damper for me, because that means they're just going to make next year's games be like all the other portable versions of Pokemon. But maybe I'm wrong on that. Again, we don't know anything about these 2019 titles beyond the fact now that Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee Pokemon are probably going to be transferable to those games. So that's really nice in my book. And it's also a way to affirm or confirm that Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee is still part of that core series of Pokemon titles, even if people don't want it to be. The fact that you'll be able to transfer Pokemon, can probably use the Pokemon Bank and get Pokemon from Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and Moon. Even though it's clearly built around this idea of bringing more and more people together to experience Pokemon, it's still something that they're trying to connect to the rest of the series. I'm very interested in that. I'm a bit sad that it sounds like there's not going to be a lot of story differences. This essentially confirms that this is basically a Pokemon Yellow remake. There's not really a whole, when you talk about not having a lot of differences in the story, it's like, yeah, okay, Pokemon Yellow remake, clearly. So it's not just inspired by Pokemon Yellow, it's Pokemon Yellow with new mechanics. But I'm excited about that because Pokemon Yellow is one of my favorite Pokemon games out there. But anyways, folks, you guys let me know what you think about this interview, this extremely long interview, down in the comments below. Love it, hate it, indifferent, I want to know. Anyways, folks, I'm Nathaniel Rufflejans from Nintendo Prime, and if you like this video, you know what to do, and if you dislike the video, hit that dislike button, subscribe for more content, and I'll catch you in the next one. Yes.